I'm Bia, and welcome back to Kardec Radio for Teens. For those of you who might not know, and this might be your first time listening, Kardec Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that is easier for us to understand and more relatable to what we live in today in our world, instead of just reading these books that can be very complicated or listening to lectures from adults that might also have difficult language for us and maybe it doesn't seem like it applies directly to us when it actually does. For months now, we've been going through the Spirits book together, and we've been reading it question by question, page by page, word by word, and we've been going through every little bit of it and trying to read what it says and then also understand it and interpret it and make sense of it, because sometimes when you're reading, after you finish all these pages, you still don't understand what it's saying. So hopefully we can break it up piece by piece to understand what they're saying. So this part that we're on, it's about spirit life. So about the spirit and the life of the spirit not incarnated, not on earth. And if you have missed any of the shows, I recommend going back and listening to them, because it really makes sense to hear all the questions together instead of just bits and pieces here and there. So the part that we're up to is question 257. And there's something a little different about this question, because it's not exactly a question itself. It's actually more of, it goes on for pages, for many pages. We might not even get through all of it today. And it goes on for many pages, and it's just explaining and just talking more about this topic without having a question, just kind of explaining themselves a little bit more in depth. So what this part is called, this section actually has its own part, and it's called Theoretical Essay on Sensations in Spirits. So right there, it already says it's an essay, so it's long and it's a lot of paragraphs, but we'll go through it paragraph by paragraph, or maybe even split up the paragraphs when their paragraphs are too long, and we'll go through it and try to understand what they're saying. So, question 257, which is not exactly a question, but still we'll call it a question. The body is the instrument of pain. If not its primary cause, at least its immediate cause. The soul has the perception of such pain, and this perception is the effect. The memory that it preserves as pain can be very acute, but this does not imply any physical sensation. Actually, cold and heat cannot disorganize the soul's tissue. A soul can neither freeze nor burn. Every day, we do not see the memory or the concern about a physical ill producing its effects, even to the extent of causing death. So they're talking about how for us, when we're incarnated, when we're in this material world, the body is what has that like physical pain effect. So if you cut your finger, you have that physical pain effect. And like they said here, that if you burn yourself or you freeze something like frostbite, and you really hurt yourself with frostbite because it's cold, the soul doesn't have this physical body like we do. So the soul as in the disincarnated spirit, they don't have this, you can't burn a soul. You can't burn this spirit or freeze it, like have frostbite, because they don't have this physical body. And then, so the last kind of question that they leave off, which is kind of the question that we can think about more, they said, every day, do we not see the memory of or the concern about a physical ill producing its effects, even to the extent of causing death? So right there, they're kind of implying that it's not the physical, sometimes it's not the physical pain, but they're talking about the memory or the concern. You might be so concerned about having a certain illness, or it's just a memory. When I was little, I had this. I had this in a past life. So it's these concerns that also are producing its effects on us and hurting us even more than just a physical pain. And then it continues. We all know that individuals who have undergone an amputation feel pain in the limb that no longer exists. The limb is obviously neither the site nor the starting point of the pain. The brain itself has simply retained the impression. So right there, that was a really good comparison, is that people who have amputation, so they have to like lose part of, let's say, their leg or their arm, and so they lose, say you lose your hand, but these people sometimes they still feel pain in their hand even though they lost it and they don't have a hand anymore. But it's because your brain kind of remembers the impression of, oh, when I put my hand on the stove it hurt, but you don't actually have a hand anymore. So that's the kind of the example they're using. And then they continue. Likewise, we can assume that there is something similar in the suffering of spirit after death. So this is the same. So what they're going to get into it more, but just to quickly say it, is that it's something like that. It's like they don't have that physical hand and they don't have that physical body, but they still feel the pain just because of that memory, just of that impression that they remember what it was like when I had a hand and I burned myself. So even though I don't have that physical hand anymore, I still do have that memory of it. And then they continue. An in-depth study of the perispirit, which plays such an important role in all spirit phenomena, such as vaporous or tangible apparitions, in the state of the spirit at the moment of death, in the so frequent notion that it is still alive, in the frightening situations of suicide, in those who have undergone capital punishment, in those who have overindulged in material pleasures, and so many other facts have shed light on this question, providing the explanation that we are presenting here in this summary. So basically right there, what they're saying, to sum it up, they're just saying, based on these in-depth studies that we've done on the perispirit in many different circumstances, like they were saying. So in all these different circumstances, they've done in-depth study in it, and they kind of got something out of it. So now they're going to explain what they got out of it. And now they continued. The perispirit is the link that unites the spirit with the matter of the body. And we talked about this way in the beginning, but just a reminder, so it's like there's a body and then there's a spirit, but there's a link between us, and that link is the perispirit. It is drawn from the environment, from the universal fluid. At the same time, it contains electricity, magnetic fluid, to a certain extent, inert matter. We could say that it is the quintessence of matter. It is the beginning of organic life, but not of mental life, because it belongs to the spirit. So it is organic life, but not mental, not like thinking like animals or like your body, your body, if we didn't have our spirit, then it would just be a body. So the spirit is kind of what makes it that thinking, a mental life. The perispirit is also the agent of external sensations. In the body, these sensations are localized in the organs that serve as their channels. When the body is destroyed, the sensations become generalized, and that is why a spirit does not say that it suffers more in its head than its feet. Moreover, we have to be on our guard against being confused as to the sensations of the perispirit, which have become independent of the sensations of the body. We can only take the latter as a term of comparison and not as an analogy. So, one thing that they're mentioning here that's important for us to understand is when they're saying that in your body, it's localized, right? So if you put your hand, like we said, put your hand on a stove, that's going to burn your stove, but that's going to burn your hand, That's going to burn your hand, but your feet's going to be fine. Your feet aren't going to be like crying and hurting a lot. So it's just going to be your hand that's hurt. But when you don't have this body, like they said, when the body's destroyed, it's more generalized. So when you feel like the memory of that burn, it's not just in your hand because there isn't that physical hand anymore. You just kind of feel it as a general feeling all over. And And then they continued. Free from the body, the spirit may suffer, but this suffering is not the same of that of the body. However, it is not an exclusively mental suffering either, like remorse, because the spirit may complain of being hot or cold. So, once the spirit is not in a physical body like we are, once they aren't in this physical body, they don't feel suffering like we do. Like, if like we were saying, like freezing, but they said that it's not completely, or like burning your hand like we were saying, it's not completely physical. So they don't really have this physical, oh, I burned my hand, it hurts. But they do have a little bit of it, like they can feel that they're hot or they're cold. So that is one way that it's not mental, because you would think, okay, so the spirit only feels like mental pain, like guilt and remorse. But it's not, they can complain of being hot or cold, but like we said before, not like freezing or burning. And then they continue. Nevertheless, it suffers no more in summer than in winter. We have seen spirits pass through flames without feeling any pain, showing that temperature has no effect on them. So for some spirits, it doesn't have an effect on them, but for some spirits, they do complain about it and they do feel that pain. The pain they do feel is not physical pain per se. It's a vague inner sensation of which the spirit is not always aware, because the pain is not localized or produced by an outside agent. It is a memory rather than a reality, but a very painful memory nonetheless. At other times, it is more than a memory, as we shall see. So what they're saying here is that some spirits, they can go straight through a fire and not feel anything, and not feel that pain. But some spirits, they may feel this pain, but it's not like they're getting burnt, because there's nothing for to burn like our physical body. But maybe they suffered through a traumatic fire in one of their lives, and now they're remembering that pain, and that's what's affecting them. So it's not exactly a physical pain, but it's like connecting an event to something, a memory or a concern, and that's what make it painful. And it's not like, oh, just my hand, just my leg. It's localized because they're just in a spiritual state. So it's more of a memory, like they said, than a reality. It's not about what's happening right now, but thinking about that memory of what happened before. And then they continued. Experience has taught us that the perispirit disengages itself more or less slowly from the body at the moment of death. During the first few moments, the spirit does not comprehend its situation. It does not think it has died, because it feels alive. It sees its body as at its side and knows that its own, but does not understand why they are separated. This state lasts as long as there is a link between the body and the perispirit. So what they're saying is that they're talking about right now during the first few moments of death. So when you die, and then they're saying, okay, the spirit's confused because they think, okay, I'm supposed to be dead, but I feel alive. Like, I feel like I'm alive. They also see their body on the side of them, and they think they see it, that's them, but they're like still confused and they haven't really processed yet. And they're saying that this lasts as long as there is still a link between the body and the perispirit. And then they continued. A suicide once said to us, "No, I'm not dead," and added, "Yet I can feel the worms devouring me." And then they continued. Of course, the worms were not devouring the perispirit, let alone the spirit, but only the body. Since the separation between the body and the perispirit was not yet complete, there continued to be mental repercussions that transmitted the sensation to the body. So what they're saying is, so this person was a suicide, they took their life. So when that happens, it's a much harder separation from the perispirit and the body, like we talked about previously, because it's harder because you weren't ready for that separation. So usually when it's really your time to die, and we all have to die eventually, so when it's really your time, the perispirit kind of starts loosening. The links, if we could think about them, they're kind of loosening. They're not as tight anymore. So then when you die, it just kind of makes the separation easier. But this happened all of a sudden, not on purpose. So the links, they were much stronger, and they really weren't ready to let go. So the perispirit was still very attached to this body, and the spirit said that I'm not dead, but I can feel the worms devouring me. So because he was still so connected, he was buried, and he felt like the worms and the bugs eating at his body, because that's what happens. The body decays, and the animals, they feed off the flesh and all that. So he could feel that still, because it's not that it was actually happening to him, because his spirit wasn't there. It was just his physical body, but he was still so attached that he said it felt like it was happening to him, to his perispirit, because that connection still existed. And then they continued. Repercussion is not quite the right term, however, since it may imply a highly physical effect. It was rather the sight of what was happening with the body itself. The perispirit was still attached, producing an illusion which was taken as real. Thus, it was not a memory of past occurrences. Its body had never been devoured by worms during life, but a current sensation. So this is kind of showing us that we were saying, maybe they're feeling this because they're thinking of something in their past. Maybe it's not a past, but maybe it's a sensation that they're feeling because of something that is happening maybe to their body, like we're seeing that happening to their body. They're still very connected and feeling like that's happening now, like a sensation, but happening currently instead of in the past. With these elements in mind, let us see what conclusions we might draw from these facts by studying them carefully. During life, the body receives impressions and transmits them to the spirit via the perispirit, which probably comprises what is called neural fluid. When it is dead, the body no longer feels anything because it has neither spirit nor perispirit. When disengaged from the body, the perispirit experiences sensations, but since sensations no longer reach it via a limited channel, it becomes generalized. Since the perispirit is only an agent of transmission, because only the spirit possesses consciousness, we might deduce that if the perispirit could exist without a spirit, the perispirit would feel no more than the dead body. Likewise, if the spirit had no perispirit, it would be inaccessible to any painful sensation whatsoever, as in the case with completely purified spirits. We know that the more a spirit purifies itself, the more etherealized the essence of its perispirit becomes. So the material influence diminishes as the spirit progresses. That is, as its perispirit becomes less coarse. So what they're saying right here is that when the body is dead, so there's a separation between the body and the perispirit. The body, we know, the body doesn't feel anything. It's just matter, it's just flesh, but there's no consciousness. We have that in our spirit. But they're saying that the same is kind of for the perispirit. It says the consciousness is within our spirit. So the perispirit, if it was to die too, which it doesn't actually, but if it was if we were to separate it like we separated the body, the perispirit would also just be this matter just sitting there. It wouldn't have this any more life to it, because we're the life of the mental life that we were talking about. So that way, in that way, the perispirit would kind of separate it from the spirit. It's kind of the same as the body. But at the same time, if the spirit does not have the paraspirit, then it's not going to feel any of these sensations, because the paraspirit kind of connects, kind of still brings in these pains, kind of like memories of the pains, like we were saying, but it connects these sensations. But without that paraspirit, the spirit wouldn't feel any of those sensations. And they said that's what it's like for the perfect spirits, because they aren't attached to any material thing at all. So no matter what happens to their paraspirit, they're not going to be affected by it. So it's kind of like the same. And then they continued. You might say, however, that if pleasant sensations are transmitted to the spirit via the paraspirit, so are unpleasant ones. And if a pure spirit is inaccessible to some, it must be equally inaccessible to others. Yes, without a doubt, but only those sensations coming from the influence of matter, which we are familiar with. So what they're saying is here, so the pure spirits, so they're not getting these bad sensations, right? Because they're pure, so their paraspirit isn't like letting them be affected by it. So, okay, but what about the good sensations that come from it? And they said, yeah, they're not going to get those good sensations either, but to them, they have other good sensations because they don't need matter to make them happy or to make them sad. So either way, they're not affected by it, basically. The sound of our instruments and the smell of our flowers make no impression whatsoever on a pure spirit. Yet it enjoys inner sensations of indefinable enchantment, of which we do not have the slightest idea, because they are as imperceptible to us as the light is to those born blind. So basically they're saying that they don't need, like us, like, oh, you smell a flower, it's so nice. Oh, you hear music, it's so nice. But for them, they don't need any of that material happiness because they have their own happiness and their own, like, forms of, like, entertainment, we can say, or stuff that makes them happy that we can't even come close to understanding. And they continued. We know they exist, but in what way? Our knowledge ends there. We know that spirits have perception, sensation, hearing, and sight, but these faculties are attributes of the whole being, not only for certain organs, as in the case with human beings. But once again, how is this so? That is what we do not know. The spirits themselves cannot explain it to us, because our language was not made to express ideas that we cannot conceive of. Just as the language of primitive tribes, there are no terms for the expressing of our arts, science, and philosophical doctrines. So what they're saying is so more in depth about these pure spirits and how their world is that we don't have the information for, because one, it might not be time for us to know about that, and also because our language and how we describe things, they don't have the words for it. They don't have the words to say, oh, it's like this, because it's not like that. So we don't have the vocabulary to understand, just like how if we went to cavemen back in the day, they wouldn't have the knowledge to understand what we were trying to say. So that's where we will leave off today, and we got pretty far. We got more than halfway through, so we will definitely finish it up next week, that essay, and then we'll move on back to our normal questions, normal in quotations. But before we leave off today, I'd like to leave with our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's date, May 23rd. Judge by our actions. We judge ourselves by what we feel capable of doing, while others judge us by what we have already done. Life is like a permanent job interview. We walk into the interview feeling as if we are capable of doing almost anything, if life would just give us a chance. But life insists on asking us what we've actually done. A kind person is a person who acts kindly to others. An honest person is a person who tells the truth and is fair with others. Understanding what others see in us can help us become more like the person we perceive ourselves to be. I wonder what others see when they look at me. I will take a hard look at myself to make sure my actions align with the person I believe I am. If at all you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want me to explain anything more, I surely will. Feel free to email me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia. Thank you all for listening. This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.